Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the North Dallas Plano Career Focus Group. Very glad you're with us this morning. It's March 18th, 2022. Our agenda this morning, we'll start out with success stories. I did not hear from anybody, but maybe somebody out there has got some good news to share. We'll then have everybody put their 30-second introductions into the chat window. We'll then hear from our committee reports, workshop, job fairs, the practice interview team, the interview success workshop, the career tip of the week. And then we will hear from our speaker right around 10 o'clock or so. For those people on Zoom, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please just open up the Zoom chat window and enter your questions there. For those watching on Facebook right now, good morning. Thank you for being with us. If you have any questions, please just put your comments into the chat, into the comment field. I am monitoring that feed. Please note this event is being recorded and is currently live on Facebook. The recording will be on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel for others to view in the future. By participating in this event, you give consent for your name and picture to appear. Please note that any comments you put in the Zoom chat window will not appear in the recording. Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Morris. Back in 2007, I took over facilitating and leading this group. This group's been around since the late 1990s. Like I said, I took it over in 2007 when the prior leader got a job and said, who wants to take over? And I think I scratched my face. He said, okay, Jeff, you're it. So I've been doing this since 2007. In 2008, I started a website called careerdfw.org, a website to help those who are unemployed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. In 2012, I launched a second website, careerusa.org, to help those around the United States. I have written a book called What I've Learned About Your Job Search That You May Not Know. It is available on Amazon, or you can get it from me directly at a cheaper price. And since 2017, I've been a member of the practice interview team, also known as the PIT crew, and you'll hear more about that in just a couple of moments. Well, we like to start the meeting off with success stories. Do we have any landings? Anybody out there have good news to share? Any landings? Going once, going twice. All right, nothing this week. All right, we'll move on. All right, what we'd like everybody to do now is, if you would, please open up the chat window, and we'd like you to put your 30-second introductions into the chat window. Put your name, comma, phone number, comma, email address, comma, positions you're looking for, comma, 2 or 3 target companies, and then hit the return key. I will copy all this information and I'll put it in an email that I'll put out to everybody this afternoon around lunchtime. And look it over and see who's on that list. Who can you help? Do you know somebody at one of those target companies, somebody who you can, give that warm introduction so they can get their foot in the door? Because that's how most jobs are found. So if you can, please put your information in the chat window. Also, the information you put in the chat window tells me that you were here at the meeting, and then I will add you to the roster. So if you don't put your email address and your name in the chat window, I won't know you're here. And if I don't know you're here, you won't get the email this afternoon about this. So let's put 30 seconds on the clock. You're welcome to continue putting your information in as we move on here. All right, it's time to hear about job, career fairs, training, workshops going on. Good morning, Eldon.
Good morning, Jeff, and happy Friday, everyone, and happy belated St. Patrick's Day to everyone as well. As Jeff said, I'm going to tell you about career and job fairs and special workshops or events. They come from the calendar tab on the website, careerdfw.org, which is on the screen in front of you. You'll notice the various multicolored features on the calendar. They indicate different topics of things that you can participate in throughout the weeks and months. Again, I focus on 2 main categories: careers and job fairs and special workshops. I do go over these things fairly quickly, so if you hear something that catches your interest, I urge you to go to the appropriate tab on the calendar, click on that particular item, and you'll usually find more information about that event. All right, this week's Career and Job Fairs. The 22nd Annual Virtual Career Fairs by City Career Fairs is being held today, Friday, March 18th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. at the Holiday Inn Conference Center, Dallas Galleria at 6055 LBJ Freeway in Dallas. And there's a link to find out more about that, and it's starting in just a few minutes. There's a Meet the Recruiters and See the Job Openings workshop or a career fair on Tuesday, March 22nd from 4 p.m. to 5:30 at the Las Colinas Country Club at 4400 North O'Connor Road in Irving. And please look at the calendar because there's quite a few different types of folks they're looking for, from business analysts, accountants, project managers, HR managers, mortgage, tax audit, blah, blah, blah. And it's quite a long list, and there is a link to find out more about that and to register for the event. And finally, the Arlington Area Job Fair will be held Wednesday, March 23rd. That's from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Rush Creek Church, which is located at 2350 Southwest Green Oaks Boulevard in Arlington. And there is a link to find out more about that. This week's special workshops or events on Tuesday, March 22nd from 1 p.m. to 2:30 p.m. Join Locke Alderson, Terry Sullivan, Ruth Lipsky, or Kurt Vondemutter for an online session on LinkedIn. This week's session is actually featuring our own Jeff Morris, speaking about LinkedIn. Also online, interviewing Wednesdays at 1 p.m. This is from 1 to 2:30 p.m. on March 23rd. You can observe a practice interview from the pit crew each Wednesday, and there's a Zoom link to participate in that event. And finally, there's an online networking webinar that's held on Thursday, March 24th from 1 p.m. to 2:15 p.m. Join Career DFW and CareerUSA.org on the second and fourth Thursdays from 1 to 2:15 p.m. for their networking seminar. They have a different speaker each week, each session talking about networking, and there's a Zoom link and a Facebook link for you to participate in that. And that's it for this week.
Eldon, thank you very, very much. All right, if you know somebody who just got laid off, if you know somebody who's unemployed, if they don't know, please be sure to pass the words along. Tell them about Career DFW and CareerUSA.org, two free websites. We don't collect any personal information, just here to give you information to help you along in your job search. All right, it's time to hear from Mr. Scottish, Mr. O'Donnell. Mr. O'Donnell, who wants to talk about the practice interview team, as he's all dressed up in green and he's got his green hat on tonight.
Yeah, where are your golf clubs? Where are your golf clubs, Mark?
Say again?
Where are your golf clubs?
Yeah. Oh, my wife got me this for St. Patrick's Day, which I think is very appropriate since I'm a McDonald. So let me tell you about the pit crew. I just posted my contact information, which is my personal, my LinkedIn profile, the phone number to reach the pit crew, the email address for the pit crew, and a website that it's actually a pointer to Jeff's website, but it's where you can find all the information I'm about to tell you. So you don't really need to take any notes. When you're ready to practice, you can just go to dallaspitcrew.com and it'll tell you what you need to know. But the pit crew is a group of volunteers. So everything we do is free. The volunteers have all been hiring managers and have all been through job transition. As a matter of fact, most of them are currently in job transition, about 90% of them. A few of them, like Walt and myself, are retired and give back as part of our retirement activities. So very sympathetic and empathetic group. So we walked in your shoes, we know what you're facing, and we want to help you, do well in your interviews to shorten your job search. So what does doing well in your interviews mean? Well, we believe in practice. I guess 2 weeks ago, I had a candidate who was an adult education specialist. And so I asked her, and I kind of already knew the answer, but it was a leading question. But I asked her, how do adults learn the best? And adults learn the best by doing, by actually doing it. So all the reading and studying and maybe even preparation you do does not necessarily mean you're going to be polished when you get in the interview. So we try to give you a very realistic interview experience. So it's based on a job description that you provide, you pick out, and your resume, and then where you are in the interview cycle. So our kind of motto is practice early and practice often. So you want to practice early in your job search, so you get some polish in general on how interviews go. And then as opportunities arise, you may want to practice for each interview cycle, which you're going to get about one per month on average, a chance to go through an interview cycle. And wouldn't it be great if you could take 2 or 3 months off of that time? It's a lot of money in your pocket if you get prepared and polished for your interviewing. So when you're ready to practice, you just need to send your information to dallaspitcrew@gmail.com, dallaspitcrew@gmail.com. So that's your resume, your job description, and your preference of date and time for the interview. So that's Tuesday evening, Wednesday afternoon, or Thursday afternoon, are the times during the week when we have practice interviews. And if you go to the website, it'll tell you the exact date and times that are available. And the Tuesday evening window is in the evening. So people who work during the day, maybe they have bridge jobs, maybe they have part-time jobs, maybe they're currently employed. There's time slots on Tuesday evening for them to practice as well. It's not all during the day. So send that information to dallaspitcrew.com. Give us a couple of days to get volunteers lined up, and we'll have your practice interview. So next week is completely open. If you wanted to send me information today, I'd be scheduling your practice interview for next week. And yeah, that's that. So that's the two-way interview offering from the Pit Crew. It's currently virtual. Sometime in April, I believe, we're going to be going to face-to-face, but we'll still keep the Tuesday night virtual interviews Tuesday evening. So the Pit Crew also offers one-way practice interviews. So Jeff, way back at the beginning of the pandemic, lined up a one-way interview company called Easy Hire. They donated their tool to his organization and made it available to me with the Pit Crew. And so my goal is just to get you used to using these tools, because it's a little strange, I have to say. So I give you the questions in advance. There's only 4 of them. They're very important questions for every interview. And then you get a chance to practice interacting with the tool, which is once we get started is like totally automated. I put your email in the system, and then you get a link, and then you engage the tool, answer the 4 questions, and then after that you get a link to the video so you can see how you did. And of course you can do that multiple times, and I think you're going to want to after you see the first try. So that's the one-way practice interview. Just go ahead and send me some information, send me an email to get the process started, and that's how that works. There's my LinkedIn profile. If you'd like to link in with me, and I encourage you to do that to give you more access to my network in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, is send a message and include a message when you link in with me. And it doesn't have to be very long. It just says, we met at North Dallas Career Focus Group, and that's good enough for me. I'll add you to my network. I do get quite a few requests where nobody leaves a message to let me know where we met, and so those are still all backed up. I don't delete them because that might, get them in trouble with LinkedIn, but I do ignore them. So please include a message if you'd really like to join my network. All right, volunteers. I need volunteers. An amazing thing happens. People who volunteer for the Pit Crew, get jobs, and then I have to backfill them. So I'm always looking for new people to volunteer, be part of the Pit Crew. The only prerequisite is that you've been a hiring manager. It doesn't matter what field. It's not a big time commitment involved. I have about 30 people on the list. So, you can participate as little or as much as you'd like. Reach out to me, and we can talk some more about it if this is something that interests you. Thanks. Jeff?
Thank you very much, Mark. All right. Good morning, Walt. Interview Success Workshop.
Well, good morning, everyone. And let me tell you first that back in the day, years ago, when my father suggested or offered that he would give me a quarter for every 4-leaf clover I could find, I used my entrepreneurial spirit. I used my creativity and enthusiasm. I hired my brother on a commission-only basis, and we began to split one of the 3 leaves on a 3-leaf clover and sold them to my dad for a quarter. Well, it didn't last very long. Funding was lost and my business was over. But that was my first entrepreneurial, self-employed business. And I know Mark used to play golf, but he lost his golf ball, so he quit. So on to the interviews. So on to the interview success workshop. And I enjoy helping people learn how to improve their skills for a successful job interview, to gain that confidence. That's always through practice. I love the pit crew. I love what it does. I support that wholeheartedly. Well, I also think about when I failed an interview so badly back in 2000 that I decided I better improve my own skills. And so was born the interview success workshop. And I figured out that we were really looking at selling 3 things that companies are buying, and that's who we are, what we do, and how we can help. And how do we sell those in an interview? And how do we differentiate ourselves? So this is an interview that's pretty choppy. It's covering the 12 basic categories of questions. It's looking at strategies, suggestions, opinions, options, structures, things like that on how to answer that, so we can pay attention to the fundamentals of how we can do those 3 things of selling, I am, I do, I help, and the differentiation. You have to be registered 10. Look me up on LinkedIn under Walt Glass. It's a free workshop. Send me an email to my Yahoo email address, which I reserve just for the workshop itself. And I'll be glad to give you some dates of availability and get you registered. And I only do 1 or 2 people at a time. And in this very informal workshop, you will get an interview video. You'll get a handout about the interviewing stuff that we're talking about, plus some other things related to interview. And you get a 1-hour video that goes over everything in the handout for your reference and for future reference. All you have to do is just send me a note. Now, if you'd like to send me a note right now today, in order to try to make it easy for you, just use your camera for that QR code and it'll bring up the beginnings of an email, which I've also included on that slide. So all you got to do is just put in your phone number, how you learned about the workshop and when, and then delete my signature and add yours, and we'll get you signed up. Be glad for you to do that. Now, there's no need for you to have to squirm, no need for you to have to be anxious, have anxiety while we're just learning. So we can have some fun while we're learning as well. Therefore, I call the workshop, we will have learning without squirming. It's time to practice, I think. So in the interview, we don't stink. It's practice for the job we desire, and we will be that company's next hire.
Thank you very much, Walt. All right, it's time to hear for the career tip of the week. This week, Elizabeth Haggerty is with us. So Elizabeth, thank you for being with us. And here you go.
Okay. All right. So this week, 6 ways to figure out how you should be getting paid before negotiating your salary or raise, by Jennifer Liu. By now, most people know that interviewing for a new job will involve negotiating salary. And most people also hear that in order to negotiate salary, you should have to know your market value. Well, what exactly does that mean, and how do you figure it out? Employers have long way to go before becoming transparent about their pay practices. Until then, it's up to the employees to talk to each other and to advocate for themselves. The good news is that there are a growing number of state and local policies, online resources, and networks of people willing to share information in the name of salary transparency and pay equity. Here are a few ways to figure out how much you should be paying. Your market value will depend on a handful of personal factors, such as job title, years of experience, education, skills, etc., and how they fit into the context of the job market. It's getting easier to look up pay ranges because where you live, says HR consultant and career coach Michelle Yu. At least 10 states and cities have passed laws that require employers to affirmatively state their salary ranges. In Colorado, they're required to be listed in job descriptions, and New York City will follow suit come May. If you live in a state or city that has salary transparency laws in effect, you can search online for job openings for your current title or one that you're going for and see the range if it's listed. Check job openings for pay ranges isn't always foolproof. Employers could advertise a role that falls between 50 to 150,000. A more direct approach would be to ask the hiring manager outright or go to your own company's HR. You says, again, you might, excuse me, again, you might be entitled to know the salary range for a new job, transfer opportunity, or promotion if your state or city requires it by law. Laws vary a lot. In Nevada, employers must provide salary range to applicants after an initial interview automatically, even if the applicant hasn't asked for it. But in Washington, employers are only required to share that salary range when they're making an offer if the applicant asks for it. Job seekers and workers should check their state's Department of Labor site for more information. There are anonymous online databases which ask users for their salary information in exchange for access to view other people's salaries in companies' reviews. With bigger databases, you can get specific and search by title, city, years of experience, or by the company. Glassdoor, PayScale, Ernst Burning Glass are a few that lead the pack and can also be used as a starting point for salary research, says Matt Gotchi, Executive Vice President of Marketing for TrueSec, an HR compliance tool. Your industry might have its own databases too. You works primarily with marginalized workers in tech and recommends sites like Candor Co., Alpha, AngelList, and Transparent Career. Other popular salary whisper networks include Levels FYI, Blind, or Fishbowl. Take anonymous salary data with a grain of salt. Excuse me. Different sites have their own standards for verifying self-reported data. And some entries can be outdated, Gotchi says, especially for a fast-growing company or one that's quickly raised compensation due to the tight labor market. Online searches can take you pretty far, but nothing as accurate or localized as talking to your peers. Gotchi stresses that it's perfectly legal and protected for those private sector employees to discuss pay with coworkers under the National Labor Relations Act. Of course, how you broach the topic will depend a lot on how you interact with your coworkers. You recommends starting with people you're comfortable with, like peers you trust, or you could tap into someone who's already said that they're passionate about salary transparency as you are. Timing could also help, like if you're going all through the performance review or a bonus session, a season, or you can open up the conversation because you're going through a raise or a promotion and would like your help gathering more pay data. If you don't go down the peer route, you could try your network and ask someone more senior than you, says author and career coach Octavia Gordina. Ask them for their perspective on how the salary range should be for that role you're after. Framing is key. You're not asking how much they earn or even how much they earned in the past, but rather what they think the range for your role should be. Gordima says, and they might share their own salary history or negotiation strategy with you. It's going to feel awkward bringing up salary, says Mabel Abraham, a Columbia Business School professor who studies gender inequities in the workplace. So the best thing to do is to make sure you build these networks over time instead of tapping into them when things are urgent. The wage gap exists, so to make sure that your network is diverse across race and gender. If you're going for a new job, remember that you are interviewing the company just as much as they are interviewing you. You says, it's not uncommon to get in touch with a connection at the company for an informational conversation to get their perspective on working there. You could bring up your pay during these meetings. Say you've researched what you think the target salary ranges should be. Are you on track or off base? That's what Nishant Paparelli did when he was negotiating his offer for software engineering job. When he got the HR's offer, the first thing he did was email a few people at the company who would be his future colleagues. These people I had just interviewed with, he said, had told me I could ask questions. So I reached out to them. He had questions about how much he should negotiate for and figure out it would be a good idea. I asked them the average pay I could expect. That helped me to come up with a counter offer. Thanks. That's a career tip this week. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. All right. If you'd like to join us for lunch today, please do so. We're going to be at Jason's Deli at 12:30. That's at 4801 West Parker Road. It's on the northeast corner of Parker and Preston. So if you'd like to join us for lunch today, please do so. We'll be there at 12:30. All right, coming up in just a couple minutes, we're going to hear about negotiations, closing the deal for what you're worth. And believe me, I did not plan this career tip of the week along with this topic. It just, luck of the draw happened to merge the two of them together. So Krystal Yates will be with us, and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Upcoming sessions I want to talk about next week. Jay Frisero will be with us to talk about effective networking. Just Jay's an outstanding speaker. His process is very analytical. And if you're not networking, if you feel like you need to brush up on your networking skills, Jay is an excellent, it'll be a really good talk next week. And then coming up on the first Friday in April Fool's Day. Oh yeah, April Fool's Day. What will we do that day? We're going to have open forum. We'll talk about whatever questions you have about your job search. So as we do the first Friday of every month, please join us for that. All right. Before our speaker gets on, we'd love to see your smiling faces. It allows our speakers to be able to, give a little feedback as as she's presenting and stuff. So if you don't mind, please turn on your video so she can get a little bit of feedback and we can see you. All right, so it's time for our main event. Krystal's with us. She's a small business HR expert, professional resume writer, and career coach. And Krystal, thank you for being with us. And I'll let you tell people more about who you are.
All right, I can do that. Can you hear me okay?
We can.
Perfect. Good morning, Jeff. I'm really happy to be here. Elizabeth, your feedback was perfect. We're actually going to take exactly what she talked about and do a deeper dive into that. I do have a background in human resources. I've covered pretty much every area of that. I've done the hiring, I've been a recruiter, and I've managed my departments as well. So when I started working with job seekers, I was able to come into it with a really wide understanding of what companies were looking for and what they wanted. So I've translated that into helping job seekers. And I love this topic because not only do I find so many people don't negotiate, it's not a topic very many people want to talk about. I think we've been conditioned as Americans not to talk about money. And this is where it has to stop. There are studies regarding, pay inequality and that sort of thing. And it all comes back to our fear of discussing it. So I'm going to encourage everybody here to get comfortable talking about salaries. I don't dive into the ask your colleagues, ask the higher ups in the company, but that is excellent advice from Elizabeth to consider doing that. So, first question is, why negotiate? And I guess I need to share this, don't I?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Screen.
Let me do that. Figure out how to do that.
So the very bottom of the screen, it should say share.
Oh, here we go.
screen.
Yeah, I see that. My screen went smaller on me for some reason. Okay. All right. Can we see my screen now?
Yep, we got it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So the first question I always like to ask is, why do we want to negotiate? And because we're online, it's going to be a little bit harder for people to jump in. So I'll answer some of my own questions here, but I will ask people, if you have questions, reach out in the chat and please ask them. Jeff's going to monitor that and he'll jump in with questions. I find that they're easier to answer mid discussion, but if we don't get to them, there will be time at the end for questions as well. And I'll make sure anybody that's not comfortable asking a specific question also has my email address that you can reach out after. So why do we want to negotiate our salary? The reason learning this skill is so important is because over 70% of companies expect you to negotiate. That means that if you're not, you're leaving money on the table. And I left that as a pretty broad number. If you do look at different research studies, I've seen numbers as low as 70%, and I've seen them as high as almost 90%. So that means that you can almost guarantee you're not going to get everything you could if you don't negotiate. If nothing else makes you want to step out of your comfort zone and negotiate, that should do it. And when I jump into this, I come from a background, I wasn't a good negotiator. It's taken a lot of practice. I've gotten a lot better, but I always had a real discomfort with it. And so I wanted to find a way to make it easy for my clients that had a discomfort with it. My salespeople, my people who negotiate for a living, they already are comfortable with that. They know what they're doing. And if anybody on here has those skills, by all means, use those really great negotiating skills you have. But for those of you who look at yourself and think, oh, I'm not good at that and I don't have the opportunity to practice, we're going to talk about some real practical skills that anybody can use. And the first one is advice that I know everybody's heard, and that's don't talk money too early. Now, I'm also fully aware that that advice doesn't always work, right? What happens when it shows up on the application? What do you do? Well, what you're going to do is put the lowest number that you're willing to take. I talk to a lot of recruiters, and for the most part, this is one thing that they agree on. You're not locking yourself into that low number, but if they're putting it out there this early, it means they're using it as a screening question. So lowest number that you'd be willing to take if all the stars aligned, and then be prepared to go up as you learn more about the position. But if it doesn't show up here, then you're going to avoid that question for as long as possible. And by the way, folks, I see too many people in that initial screening phone call asking the recruiter, what's the pay range? It's really hard to stop yourself because you really want to know. But my advice is if they don't mention it, you don't mention it. The reason is I have a salary range in mind as a hiring manager. And this is what I'm sticking to. And if you don't fall inside that, I'm not going to talk to you any further. Now, if I've gotten 3 or 4 interviews in the process, and I really, really like you, and I've committed all this time, and you're asking for a little bit above my range, odds are relatively good I'm going to go up a little bit. Now, I'm not going to go up a lot. And I think that's a piece of advice we hear out there, that you can come in and negotiate twice the salary. That's not going to work. They have a budget for a reason. but you can certainly find a little bit of flexibility often. So I kind of went off on a tangent there, but how do we basic tenets for negotiating salary? First, push it off. When you get asked about salary, acknowledge, I understand why you're asking me this. I don't want to waste your time any more than you want to waste mine. However, deflect. I don't know that I'm ready to give you an answer yet. I don't really know enough about the position. In that initial screening, even in that first interview, that's often an accurate statement that you can use. And then you want to ask them their range. But I'd love to know what your pay range is, and I can let you know if that's acceptable to me. And then you find that win in the situation. And we're going to talk about finding that win when you get to the true negotiation process. We're really going to dig into that. A negotiation, a win is not walking away with the other person feeling like they lost. A good negotiation means both people, both sides walk away feeling like they've gotten everything they needed out of it. And we're going to talk about ways to move into that as well. So any questions at this point? Okay. So one of the most common questions we hear is, what were you making at your last job? This question really makes me cringe. I work with a lot of professionals transitioning out of one industry into a new one. I'm going to tell you, when that's the case, what they were making at their last job is completely irrelevant. But even if you're making a relatively lateral move, we don't know if it's relevant or not. So when you're asked, what were you making at your last job? You want to say something along the lines of, that amount isn't relevant to this conversation. However, again, we're deflecting and asking them their range. I'd love to hear what range you're offering. You are never, ever obligated to tell an employer what you made at your last job or what you're making at your current job. Now, there are still some bad ones out there who will push you for that information. I'm fully aware of that. And at that point, you have to decide how interested are you in the job that you're willing to, whether you're willing to answer that question. But it's not relevant and it shouldn't matter. And if you respectfully push back, often you can get them to back off, because for the most part, it's not really what you were making. They really want to know what your salary range is. And because so few people are prepared to answer that, it's easier to ask, what were you making at your last job? The other question, the better question, is what are your salary expectations? Now, again, early in the process, and I write this down because I get a lot of questions around what's the best way to say this. And please use your words. You don't have to sound like me when you answer this, but I don't yet know enough about this position to answer that. I don't know. So, but I'd love to know what range you're offering. So again, we're deflecting instead of answering and asking them to tell us their range. Jeff, was there a question?
Yes, Susan asked, sometimes you have to apply by entering your information online, and the salaries for multiple previous jobs are required to submit the form. What do you suggest entering? $1?
If you can put an X, if you can put a 0, if you can put a $1, but if they really want that information, they've gotten smarter about that. So again, I'm going to look at that and I'm going to ask myself, why does the company want to know this? That really makes my skin crawl for them to ask at this stage. However, I'm not in the middle of a job search, so take that with a grain of salt. You have to decide, are you really interested in that position? And if the answer is yes, then you may have to answer it. What you don't want to do is lie, because that can kick you out from the process completely. Now, I don't think putting $1 in would be considered a lie by most companies, but if you put the wrong amount in, if you put in a higher amount to try to push the process or something, that could come back and bite you. So be very, very careful. about not putting the correct amount in.
All right, Rusty asked, are there any nuances in discussing salary with an executive recruiter?
You know, I assume you mean a third-party recruiter. Internal recruiters, of course, work for the company. They have their budget. They're really trying to keep you within their box. A third-party recruiter is actually a really good person to discuss salary with. It is in their best interest to get you the absolute most money they can, because they make a commission when you get placed. That commission is based off of your annual salary, usually. So there's not really any nuance. The answer to that is be as frank as possible with them and ask them for their feedback on how realistic you're being.
And I think, we've had Kurt Vondermatter, who's a retained executive search consultant on our on a LinkedIn presentation. He talks about salary and talks about the fact that, he's going to want to find out, or do you fit in the category? Because if he's trying to hire a $200,000 CEO, but you only made $120,000 at your small company, maybe you're not quite at this right level for what he's looking for. So that's the reason. And believe me, they're not executive search consultants are not trying to, shortchange you, because like you said, they get a percentage of whatever you make. So they want you to get a good salary. They want you to be a good fit from a long-term situation.
Absolutely.
Matt, one more thing, and then I'll stop and let you move on here. Matt says, if you push back and say your previous salary isn't relevant because you're in a career industry transition, are you opening yourself up to being taken advantage of in salary?
Well, if we go through this whole presentation and you followed my advice, the answer is no. As Elizabeth said, and as I'll dig a little bit deeper into, that it is so easy to find salary ranges nowadays. Now, finding the right range, it's an art form. It's not a science. You're going to have to do some guessing, but there's a ton of hard data out there. So no, as long as you've done your research, then it shouldn't. And one of the things I'm going to suggest as you start the negotiation process, if they come in incredibly low, is that you show them where you found your numbers, right? This isn't about this is what I want to make. This is what I need to cover my house payment. This is what my skill set demands. So that was an excellent question though.
Okay. I'll save the rest of it because I want you to, because I think you'll probably answer some of these questions as we continue on. So I'm going to hold off answering or butting in any more questions right now.
Okay, but if we hit it and I don't answer something, keep jumping in and asking. So I don't put this in here, but while we are talking about bad employers, I always a little tongue-in-cheek like to talk about my least favorite salary expectation question. And that is, what is the least amount of money I can pay you for you to take this job? And I've been asked that before. I've had clients ask that before. Now, usually it's bad wording on the part of the person making the offer. And we have to hope that that's what it is. So I tongue-in-cheek always like to say, if asked that, then your answer should be, what's the least amount of work I can do if I come to work for you? Because somebody who didn't mean to ask that is going to laugh and reword it. And somebody that did mean to ask that is going to get offended, but you need to get away from them as quickly as possible. So I assure you that's not a job that you want long-term. So, but my point in discussing that is to recognize that at this stage, this is your first impression. How they treat you now is how they're going to treat you moving on. So just something to keep in mind. We're all human. We all say stupid things. We all have things come out of our mouth that sounded completely different inside of our heads. But, you know, this is us on our good behavior as employers. So we want to hope that they're treating you with respect from the get-go. So what do? The first thing we have to do so we can answer, how much do you want to make, is to know what we're worth. And again, what I made at my last job is completely irrelevant to this conversation. Maybe I did twice the work. Maybe I did half the work. Maybe I'm looking for half the responsibility. Maybe you're asking me to use a very, very specialized skill that I didn't use at my last job. There are so many moving parts and so many different things that come into play that you can't rely on what you were making at your last job to make sure you're answering the question correctly, even if it's a semi-lateral move. So, you know, I've got a list. These are some of my favorite websites to look for salary information, but Google's gotten so smart now. If you just Google salary for HR managers in DFW, you're going to get a list of some pretty good information. Now, my advice to you, A, look regionally. That advice is becoming less and less relevant as we go global, as we go virtual, but it is still relevant. Make sure that you are looking at a minimum of 3 sites. Okay, just because one site says something doesn't mean another site's going to be completely different. And then you've got to take a step back and ask yourself, okay, where am I going to fall in this? Just because you're transitioning into a new industry and you're brand new doesn't mean you have to ask the bottom. You're not going to be able to ask the top probably, but how many transferable skills? And one of the things that I really like to talk through in this process is skills versus abilities. Okay, you might not have the skill of using Salesforce, for example, which is what this new organization is using, but maybe you've used 5 other CRMs, so you have the ability to very quickly step in and take advantage of that. And you've got to ask yourself as you're coming up with this, where you fall in line on this. And I'm always going to recommend, and actually I love this quote, so I always have to stop here and read this quote. If you don't know your own value, somebody will tell you your value, and it will be less than your worth. Okay, I think probably everybody on here has had that job offer that you're kind of floored by. Really, that's what you're going to give me? And some of us have accepted it. So I highly encourage everybody here to make sure you know what you're worth so you can get it. Now, as you're playing with these numbers, you're going to come up with 3 different ranges, 3 different numbers. The first one, hopefully everybody here has a budget. That's a completely different discussion that we're not going to dig real far into, but we should all be living off of a budget, putting our money in savings, right? And saving for our retirement. And this budget is not your, I've been out of work for 6 weeks and I'm never leaving the house budget. This is the family likes to go to the movies on Fridays and we spend $100 on popcorn, right? What is your genuine family budget? Now, be reasonable, but what's your genuine family budget? You know, you're putting your money aside. You're doing all of the things that you do to live your life on a regular basis. In an ideal situation, it's going to be less than what's the minimum I should reasonably be offered. So that first number has nothing to do with your industry, your job title, anything along those lines. It is strictly, this is my family budget. And if you have a partner, then of course their salary is going to come into play with that. What is the minimum I should reasonably be offered? That comes back to your research. All the stars align.
Understand that.
Oh, my phone's trying to talk to me, guys. Sorry, Google's listening. All the stars align. The job's perfect. It meets all my needs. It hits all my wants. What's the minimum amount I'll take for that? And then the top number, what's the maximum I can reasonably ask for? What's the top of the scale in DFW? Or what's where do I fall in it, right? I've got 10 years experience, the top of the scale tops out at 15, so maybe I come in a little bit below that. This is where the art comes in instead of science. You have to give yourself some wiggle room, but you should have a decent field. And this is where Elizabeth's advice of talking to other people in the industry is a really great idea. If nothing else, ask to do some informational interviews with other people in other areas of the same industry. So there's lots of ways to get that information. But you have to go in knowing what these numbers are. The reason you want to know that budget number is because when you get offered, the perfect job falls in your lap and you get made that offer and you really, really, really want to take it, and you look at your budget and it doesn't line up, what do you need to do? It's not as perfect as it looked, right? So this is just pre-planning. I can't tell you how many people I've talked to who have jumped on the perfect job because it's not about the money. I don't care what anybody says. At the end of the day, money only matters until it doesn't. And so they jump on this job 2 months in to realize they can't pay their bills and they're being underpaid. So now if your minimum is lower than your budget, go talk to your financial planner. That's a whole nother conversation. And it's not really one that I'm trained to. I can certainly touch on with people one-on-one, but everybody's situations are so different. Your financial planner is your best one to discuss that with. But reasonably speaking, if we've taken good care of our careers, that minimum is going to be, that budget is going to be below the minimum. And then there's going to be a pretty wide swing on the maximum, and that's okay. That wide swing is necessary because as you learn more about the job, how do I fit it? How happy am I? What do the benefits look like? Do they meet my needs? Then the numbers start coming together, okay? So what else is on the table? When we talk about salary, we tend to just talk about salary. I have a client I'm working with right now, and she just had one of her employees try to leave because she got a $3,000 raise. And she's like, wait a minute, have you looked at this? We offer this benefit that most companies don't offer. You got a $5,000 bonus last year and you're on track to get it again this year. Have you, I pay for your insurance. Is this new company gonna pay for your insurance? And I see people make these mistakes all the time too. What haven't you taken into consideration? Now, those are monetary concerns, but there's other concerns. You know, what are the expectations? Are you leaving a job that's got you working 60 hours a week to a job that's asking for 35? Man, that could work in your favor, right? What's the company culture? Are you gonna be happier there? Tangible benefits, that's things like PTO. It's your medical benefits, your 401k, all of those ancillary benefits. And then your intangible benefits. Intangible benefits are things like flexibility, which has become the leading driver in the Great Resignation, which I'm sure we've all heard that phrase. And I'm sure some of you are part of that, right? We want that flexibility. We no longer live in a 9-to-5 work world. So you want to look at all of those things. You know, we love work-life balance. I've actually heard the term work-life harmony, and I think that's such a better term because there's no such thing as balance, but if we can make them work together. I always like to talk about when I had my daughter, I left a company that it was one of those 60-hour a week, you know, you had to have a really good excuse to leave work on time kind of jobs. And I had a company offer me closer to home and remote work. And this was before remote work was a thing. And I left, man, I left track marks on the floor. I left so fast. And I took a pay cut because it allowed me to be home with my infant daughter. At that point in my life, now I wouldn't do it now, but at that point in my life, that was what was important to me. And so we all have to take a step back and ask us what matters. You know, I work with women with small children who just want to be close to home, right? It doesn't matter the hours, it doesn't matter, but I need to be able to go pick my kid up if they're sick. Or I have an ailing parent and I need to be able to take calls to deal with them. Whatever your life situation is, and these things are important. We work hard so we can have good lives. So you want to consider all of this. We also spend a whole lot of time at our jobs. So we want to make sure it's somewhere that we want to be. So what are we going to consider when we're trying to figure out where we fall in this swing once we've put those numbers together? Are you currently working? It's not fair. It's not right. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. When you have a job, you're considered a better candidate than when you don't. But bias exists. How close to fit are you? Did you have a conversation about a special project and realize that you can step in and knock that out of the park for them? Maybe you can ask for a little bit more. Did you realize that you've only got a small portion of the specific skills they're looking for? Maybe you're going to ask for a little bit less. What's the health of the company? And that's usually an industry question. But you have to consider, IT companies right now are raking out a lot more money than logistics firms are right now. There's always, oil and gas goes up and down. So you have to look at what's going on in the industry and in that organization specifically. I own a very, very small business. If I interview you, you're not going to come in and demand Blue Cross Blue Shield insurance because I can't give it to you. I don't qualify for it, even if I wanted to pay for it. So larger companies have a lot more flexibility for bonuses and, outside the box benefits and that sort of thing. So what does that look like before you start asking for things? Not that you shouldn't, you should, but you just need to be realistic about what you're asking for. Can they afford to negotiate? Again, that goes back to the health of the industry as much as the health of the company. And then the benefits. Again, it's amazing to me. We started adding health benefits to our tax statements at the end of the year. And I think that helps people to realize what their organizations are paying. But there is such a huge swing between some companies will pay 100% of your benefits. Some companies will pay your spouse's benefits too. And then others are only going to pay the minimum that they're expected to, and you're expected to take that on. So, if they're offering you $5,000 less than you thought you wanted, but they're paying for $1,000 more a month in medical insurance for you, you actually come out ahead, right? So you have to look at the big picture. And then who's chasing who, right? Did you target this company and reach out, and have you been trying to get your foot in the door for 6 months? Or did their recruiter reach out to you and start asking you to interview? Again, bias, and it gives you a lot more wiggle room. And then you have to know where you stand. Again, hopefully you've asked them for their salary range. You understand the leverage you have, and you know when not to negotiate. And that's not very often, but there are times when you come into a situation, read the room, read the cues. There are times when negotiation is just not going to do you any favors. If they make you an offer of $15,000 above your maximum, I do want you to take a step back and wonder why. If it's because you were devaluing yourself or you were nervous, great. If you were at the top end, I would ask some questions about the culture and turnover to make sure that they're not doing that to trap you into pay. I hate to be leery of that, but sometimes, but don't negotiate when they come in really, really high. And then there's always the obvious, right? I'm not going to go into Target and get a job as a part-time cashier and demand $10 an hour more than what they've listed. Their pay is their pay. So I think most of us are a little above that, but it's still worth considering. So, and then the last piece of negotiation is once you've come to a decision, get it in writing. It doesn't have to be a formal offer, but get it in writing. I've been doing this for a long time, and I've still never come across a good reason not to. Generally speaking, if they are unwilling to put it in writing, it's because they're not going to back it up, because they don't have the authority to make you that offer, because they're playing games. I don't know, but when it's in writing, it's less confusing. If the person who hired you is gone in 6 months and you've made an agreement that you're going to get a raise in 6 months and there's nobody to back that up. So there's lots of reasons to get it in writing. And again, doesn't have to be formal, but ask them to just shoot that information over to you in an email. And almost any company is going to be more than happy to do that. So, all right, Jeff, now's a great time to jump in on those questions.
Okay, let's see here. Oops. All right, first question. Susan asked, when they check previous employment history, can they find out your exact salary history?
Yes, but you actually have to agree to that. They have to get your approval in writing for another company to release that information.
All right. Next question, when you're applying for a position online and you're asked to provide, what is your asking salary range? Should you put in the amount you really want, or should you begin with a lower salary range? Are you blocking yourself for consideration if they already have a salary range and your asking salary is higher?
So let me answer the last question first. Yes, they're using it as a screening question, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing. If they're not going to meet your salary requirements, better to know now than after you've put a lot of time into it. But the answer to what to put in there, if it forces you to put numbers in, and they almost all do, you can't fake them out like you used to could, then you want to put the lowest amount you're reasonably willing to take. You're not locked into that number. As you go through the interview process, you can decide to ask for more. So start with the low number.
Okay. Lily says, how do we make sure that they increase our salary if the company decides to reverse the remote policy after posting the position as remote? So I guess, going into the office now going to cost you because you got to have gasoline and everything else, but originally you were hired as a remote job.
Well, you can make that part of the negotiation, get it in writing, have that conversation up front. Don't just wait for it to happen and then push back. Ask them how likely is that to happen? And if it happens, what do they plan to do? And then you can decide if it's something you're even willing to do.
Okay. Matt says, how do you approach negotiation flexibility and vacation time when you know you'll be offered less vacation time than you had previously?
You ask. And I know that sounds like an oversimplification, but you simply ask. Now, good negotiation, ask for slightly more than you want, whether it's vacation time, salary, whatever. Don't go crazy because you can knock yourself out. But this is where you start asking for those things. But ask before you sign the offer. There's nothing worse than coming in your first week. And I fired somebody for doing this more than once because they dug in and wouldn't take no for an answer. But if you negotiate before we finalize the offer, I'm going to negotiate at least a little bit. If you start the job and 3 days in say, oh, by the way, I'm going to need an extra week of vacation and an extra $10,000, I'm going to say bye-bye. And I see people do that frequently. That's why I bring that up. And it's a terrible idea. Make sure that you've covered everything before the offer or before you accept the offer.
Okay. Who do you negotiate with? HR or the hiring manager?
Depends on the company. You negotiate with whoever brings the offer to you.
Okay. Whoever brings the offer to you. Okay, very good. Those are all the questions that are in the chat window.
Okay.
If anybody
All
else
right,
has
well-
if anybody else has any questions, welcome to unmute your mic and ask. Mark, go ahead.
I do. I have a two-part question. So project managers are, it's a wide breadth of responsibilities, and there's an oversupply of them in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. But how do you deal with, give some more feedback on how you determine what you're worth if you have one of these generalist kind of jobs? And the second question is, I just had a candidate come through. She hasn't practiced yet, but her job description, they want a learning and development person. It looks like 4 roles they want this one person to do. And the job description actually admits, that this is a relatively new position. But anyway, so you've got a really complicated set of requirements. How do you deal with that?
That's when you go towards the top. So the second scenario, you're asking for more. The first scenario, you're probably asking for less. And this is where regional differences come in, because we have an overabundance of project managers, especially IT here in DFW, but maybe in Oklahoma City, they don't, right? And so they're going to be paying more while we're going to be offering less. And it's an art form, and that's why I say that, because some of it and this is why you have your numbers in place, so you can determine, right, what makes sense for me, what makes this job make sense for me. Because I know a lot of people are going to be willing to take less money for something that's 100% remote or 5 minutes from the office versus somebody from Frisco driving to downtown every day, right? And the gas, as somebody said earlier. So personal decision does play into this, personal preference, personal needs. It just can't be the driver to the decision. Did that answer your question, Mark?
Yeah, I think so. You got to consider the environment, right? The local environment.
Exactly.
And I do have one comment though, and you haven't talked about this. And I've been taught, and I teach when people ask, that there's only one round of negotiation. So if you're not happy with the salary, not happy with the vacation, or you have some other request, you just get them all out at once. It's not like, okay, I get this, and then I come back to the, for that, and this third thing, it's one round.
Correct.
And if there's enough of those things that you're not happy with, you really ought to reconsider maybe.
It might not be the best. Right. It might not be the best organization for you. And I think that's a great point. Too often job seekers feel like somebody made me an offer, I have to take it. No, you don't. This is a two-way conversation and a two-way decision.
All right, Krystal, Wayne on Facebook asked, if you're working as a contractor with no benefits, what is an acceptable add-on factor to an FTE salary rate? If at all, or is it just negotiable?
It's pretty negotiable. If anything, Wayne, you're going to actually take a pay cut, a gross pay cut. You should end up taking home roughly the same, because they are going to cover some of your benefits. They're going to cover half of those taxes that you're paying. But yeah, that's a decision by decision, situation by situation.
So is there a common factor that you would, if they're going to offer, I normally make $30 an hour, what would I add on as a contractor to cover those extra benefits that a company would normally pay? So
we generally tell contractors or employees moving to contract status to ask for 40% over. 40% more than 40% over. Yep, to cover benefits, taxes, etc.
Okay. Also, Wayne continues to say here, if you're being placed through a recruiter for a contract role, is the expectation that you will take X% less due to the placements through a contractor or through a recruiter?
Not necessarily, no. The company is paying them to provide a service. The company is paying you to provide a service. how they go about finding you shouldn't affect what you're making.
Okay, great. All right, see, we've got a few more questions coming in. Rusty's got a good one here. Is there a staying point for negotiation and for negotiating an equity stake if it had been mentioned by the retained recruiter? Is like a starting point.
Oh, that's a great question, and that's not one I have an answer to. I think that's going to require some research on your part. And I think it's going to vary significantly by industry and probably by the age of the company. So yeah, no, sorry, I don't have an answer for that.
Okay. All right. Susan says, when you're getting unemployment, don't you have to take a job offer or you risk losing unemployment benefits? Is there an offer that is so low, even unemployment doesn't force you to continue benefits?
So I can't answer the specifics off the top of my head, but if you contact TWC, or actually I think it's on their website, you don't have to take a pay cut for the first so many weeks. And then after so many weeks on unemployment, they're going to ask you to take a percentage decrease and so on. And it goes down over time. Boy, I've never been asked that. That's a great question. And I wish I had the numbers. There are specifics associated with that. I just don't want to give you the wrong information.
Right. So check the TWC's website. I don't know if I would necessarily call anybody up, but I'm sure you can just research that and you'll be able to find that information out. I think that I remember back when I was on unemployment years ago, I remember that happening. Richard says, let's see here. If you won't be using medical benefits, is it practical to negotiate a higher signing bonus, salary, or vacation?
You should certainly try. Yes. Some companies will absolutely love that, and some will say it doesn't matter. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So yes.
Yeah, I know I did that for a job years ago. Was covered through my wife, and so they, I said, I'm not going to need health insurance. Will you give me an extra $5,000 a year? And they said yes. It was like easy because $5,000 wasn't even a drop in the bucket for what insurance would be for a single person.
Exactly.
Right. Given the right now, I will say this: be very careful about medical benefits nowadays, because some companies, if they know you can be covered under another policy, they're going to want you to be covered under that other policy by that other company. The laws have changed. So just because you used to be able to say you don't need medical coverage, if you're now employed, if you're covered under your significant other's coverage, they may cancel you because they want you to be insured under that company. So I know the laws changed in the last few years. Let's see here. Given the rising cost in the economy, how can you or should you factor additional dollars into your minimum salary range to make a decent living wage? For an example, 10% above your minimum salary, or,
Well, that should play into that original research. Now, that's actually a good note. I've slowly over the past few months started to see the salary research catch up to the changes in the market over the last year. When you're doing your research, look at the dates, because if you pull data that's 3 years old, 2 years ago, I'd have said, as long as you're within the last few years, you're good. We know we've seen some really significant changes to the job market and to the economy. So make sure you're looking at, but that should all be factored in. And then it becomes, is my organization going to give me cost of living increases every year? And the answer should be yes, but that should all be part of this original research that you're doing. Did I answer the question that was actually asked?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yes, you've got to start out. I mean, everybody needs to know what their minimum salary is, and then, or what they can live with, their minimum living salary needs to be, because that then sets the floor. Then you need to go do your research. So you do that personally, and then you go do your research at BLS.gov for the Bureau of Labor Statistics. You go to salary.com, you find out what this position would pay for in this area, how recent's the data, so you have an idea. And that gives you a range. So if somebody says, well, what is your range? Don't give them just, oh, I need to make, I want $78,000 a year. According to the research I've done, the salary range in this area is somewhere between 68 and 92,000 a year. I'm sure that whatever you're going to pay is going to be fair and equitable.
I love that, Jeff. That's perfect.
Yeah, give people a range and say, I'm sure that this company is going to pay a fair, and I love the words fair and equitable. I think I heard that from Steve Zipkoff, because what if company's not going to be fair and, oh, we don't pay fair and equitable wages? Okay, well, goodbye.
Exactly. No, that's great. And any HR person here is fair and equitable, and their hackles are up and they're being super cautious now. So.
Right. Anybody else have any questions? I don't see any more. So, Krystal, before you take off, or Richard, I see you just unmuted your mic.
Yeah, the question is about negotiating. Let's say you've received an offer from a company. Do you orally negotiate, or is it, is this on an email trail back and forth?
That really, again, depends on the organization. If you have any control over it, the best way to do it is orally. Get on the phone, get back in front of them, get on a Zoom call, because you can start talking through, where is your flexibility? Okay, you can only go up $5,000 instead of 10, but you can give me a hiring bonus. Or you can, you have no flexibility with the benefits because they are what they are. Well, let's talk about some extra PTO. Or, to Jeff's point, I'm not going to take the benefits. Let's talk about a little bit extra money. So okay. It's easier to be flexible and figure out what works for everybody. Otherwise, you're doing this massive back and forth email, and it's harder. It's also more uncomfortable to do it in person or to do it verbally. So you gotta steel yourself to do it.
And I think, as Mark said earlier, I think you've got to be careful that you really only have one chance to do this. So you've got to, by doing it orally with whoever gave you the offer, you have an opportunity to feel them out, like Krystal said, where you're not, if you do it via email, you really only have one chance to go, well, here's what I want. And if they go no, you don't get to hear that immediate feedback.
And nobody's asked this question, but usually one of the biggest questions I get asked is, what if I negotiate? And this is one of the 20% of companies who won't negotiate. And I think that's real important, because often people won't, because they're afraid they're going to lose their offer if they try to negotiate. You won't. Be respectful. Don't dig in and say, oh, I couldn't possibly take that. We can't have a conversation if you don't offer me at least. I mean, obviously, right? We're not going to be that black and white. We're going to say, I was really hoping to make Y instead of X, and see where that goes. But while there's a very, very small percentage of companies who will get offended, oh my gosh, you should be pleased to get any offer from me. Those are generally not, again, how you're treated now. But the vast majority of organizations, worst case scenario, are going to come back and say, we just can't do that. We don't negotiate. This is your offer. Take it or leave it. They're not going to pull the offer just because you tried to negotiate. And I think that's really important.
All right, Krystal, any final words or?
There are a ton of really great books out there for anybody in the job search. Go to your library, go on Audible. I love Audible because I can listen in the car. Just Google books on negotiation, because the more you know on it, the more comfortable you're going to be doing it.
Okay.
It takes practice.
All right. Well, there is Krystal's email address. If you'd like to connect with Krystal, there's her email address. You're welcome to do that. You can also look her up on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with Krystal on LinkedIn, please send her a personal note. That's something we, you know, I don't know if you connect with people who just say connect, but I always
Not
want that
usually.
personal note.
Not usually. And if you have a question, if anybody has a question that they weren't comfortable asking publicly, please feel free to shoot me an email and ask me. I'm happy to answer it. But again, tell me where you saw me so I know who you are and why you're asking.
Right. Well, Krystal, thank you very much for your time. Great presentation. One of the things I will put out in the email this afternoon, as long as everybody's put their contact information into the chat window, one of the things that we've got is a Excel spreadsheet that somebody put together years ago about here are all the different kinds of things that you could get benefits for, things that you could get paid from, or things you could consider. So as you're considering a couple different offers, things you may want to ask or things you may want to think about. So I'll be sure to get that out. I'll put that in the email that I put out to everybody this afternoon. Next week, our speaker is Jay Fusero. He's going to talk about effective networking. Please budget an hour and a half. Please budget 9:30 to 11:30 because he will definitely go an hour and a half for effective networking. So please, be with us because you're going to want to hear his entire presentation next week. All right, if you have not put your information into this chat window or in the comment field on Facebook, please do so. Please put your name, phone number, email address, position you're looking for, a couple target companies, because I will get that information out to everybody via, as long as I know you're here on chat. For those people watching on Facebook this morning, Wayne, I'll be sure to delete your personal information so it won't be hanging out on Facebook. As soon as the session is over, I'll go copy your information and then delete it so it's not hanging out there for other people to spam you with. All right, Career DFW and Career USA, we're putting on training 4 days a week. Please join us. Next Tuesday, I'll be doing a presentation on LinkedIn, Present Yourself Like a Pro. This is a presentation I did to a bunch of pharmacy people down in Houston a few weeks ago. So I'll be giving it to you. And the reason I'm doing it is because there happens to be 5 Tuesdays in the month of March. And since we only have 4 speakers, I thought, oh, well, I'll jump in for the 5th. So that's how come you've got me this coming Tuesday. Next Wednesday, watch an actual practice interview by the PIC crew. So please join us. That will only be on Zoom. It will not be recorded. So if you want to watch it, you do need to watch it live. And then next Thursday, being the 4th Thursday of the month, we will have a speaker talking about networking. I'll put that information out in the email that comes out this weekend. This session has been recorded. You'll be able to go back and watch it on the Career DFW Facebook page and the Career USA YouTube channel. On the Career USA YouTube channel, be sure to click on playlist. Every video that I upload, I always stick into a playlist to make it easy for you to find that information out. Just go find the topic, resumes, interviewing, networking, LinkedIn, North Dallas, Plano Career Focus Group speakers. Don't click on the video, but down below where you see that red arrow, click on View Full Playlist, and up will come a list of all the different dates. Newest one should be on top and the title, so you can go back and watch any of those videos that you'd like to watch. Hopefully, some of you will come and join us today at Jason's Deli, northwest corner of Parker and Preston. I'll be there today at 12:30, so I hope to see you there. So for everybody else, have a great weekend. Thank you for joining us today, and we'll see you next week.